Hello and welcome to the World Football Show here on Sports Tonight Live. I'm Mina Rzouki and I'm joined by my excellent co-host Gabriele Marcotti. Hello Gab, how are you? Nice to have you back. And of course Tancredi Palmeri all the way from Italy. But sadly we do start this show on a sad note after the death of Piermario Morosini. I'm sure that you've heard Serie A, all games in Serie A, Serie B and Liga Pro were cancelled because of this, because of the tragedy. He collapsed on the pitch in a game, Serie B game between Pescara and Livorno. He's a Livorno midfielder. Died on the way to hospital suffering a cardiac arrest. The autopsy will be today, so as far as I know, we still don't know yet whether it was the exact cause of death. But it seems to be happening more and more often, obviously, with what's happened with Fabrice Muamba and so many deaths at the moment occurring, so many, well, obviously Fabrice Muamba managed to escape that, but these things are still happening despite the elevated measures that are taken by Italy. Do you think that this is something that we can stop, or is it they really can't do much more because it has apparently cancelled out 90% of these types of incidents happening?
Yeah, and I'm always dubious about statistics like that because I mean I don't know how people can actually tell
what's going on.
You can't prove a negative, but I think several people spoke about this quite eloquently. I wrote a piece myself about this in the Times. There's always more tests that you can do. The problem is some of these tests are extremely invasive, and also some of these defects can sort of develop literally from one day to the next. Remember the case of Lilian Thuram, who after Euro 2008 announced that, yes, I'm going to play one more season at Paris Saint-Germain and then retire. And he went and he had his medical and they found he had an enlarged heart, which was quite a risky heart defect. And they said, no, you need to retire straight away. And this is a guy who played 20 years at the highest level for Juventus, for Parma, with the French national team, had been tested every which way, and nothing had turned up before. We can look at it as we can all put our faith in science and in medical science and test people continuously. But then, you get to a point that sometimes these invasive tests can damage players in other ways. Yeah. And I think the reality is it feels like it's happened a lot. But if you look at it relative to the number of people who play sport, not just professional sport.
Yeah, that's very true.
It's such a tiny, tiny proportion, and it only takes one or two sort of extra cases to make it seem as if all of a sudden there's an epidemic of this. And maybe we have to take all the precautions that we can reasonably take, but maybe you need to be a bit fatalistic about it as well and accept that sometimes things just happen.
I know that numbers are numbers, but of course, with all the structure that there is in Italy, and 1 month ago we were talking about Muamba, and everyone was saying, Italy is an inspiration. And apart from that, today Fabrice Muamba was discharged from the London hospital, and I mean, our life can be strange sometimes. Yeah. On Saturday, Morosini had 3 heart attacks and died, and Muamba survived 4 heart attacks, and after 1 month is discharged. And of course, with all these talks in Italy, the debate was open and saying, are we still so sure that it is really so good? And the question was also referred to in the Sport Medicine Institution. And they said, of course, everything, as Gabriele said, could be better in some way. But still, look at this. They showed, they had this statistic that after the structure in 1982 started to be in that way in Italy, the impact in Italy is on 1 case like that every 1 million, 1.5 million of professional sportists. Abroad Italy, the proportion is 1 case every 100,000, 150,000. So it is 10 times more.
Yes.
At the same time, when I was speaking with, before cause of the Muamba case, I was speaking with the former Inter head doctor, Piero Volpi, and changing opinions about these things is he was there at Inter when Inter saved practically Nwankwo Kanu that came from Ajax, and that is, and they found that he had this problem. The first thing he said was, first of all, let's keep in mind that it's not perfect. It's not a perfect system. He's not said that with all the screenings, everything will be found.
Of course. I want to talk a little bit more about the player. He had obviously a very tragic life in the sense that he lost his mother in 2001. 2 years later, he lost his father from cardiac problems as he suffered heart problems. His disabled brother committed suicide 2 years after that. And he's left alone with his older sister. And of course, now he's passed away too. But as a player, you know, he was an under-21 international. He played in all the youth systems. He grew up in the prestigious Atlanta youth system. He played alongside Balotelli, Abate, Marchisio. What kind of player? I mean, he was renowned for his athletic ability. Can you share with us a little bit more about the stories?
Well, he was not very famous, of course. And it was more
owned by Udinese.
Owned by the Udinese, yes. And this is an important point. Not very famous, but by people that are interested in Serie B in category, was known as a reliable midfielder. We can say a kind of more, with more gentle foot than Gattuso, a kind of that way. But there is a good point. He was owned by Udinese, and he was changing a lot of teams along the years.
Yes.
And he was owned by Udinese since, if I'm not mistaken, must be already 7 years. Now, Udinese also renovated the contract with him, and he changed the team almost every year. When is happening something like this, if a team is not believing anymore in a player, after the 4 years expiring the contract, it's just saying, okay, we're not interested anymore. We have given you on loan for 4 years, nothing happened, no more. Instead, and Udinese is always taking care about the talent, we know about them. Instead, they felt that sooner or later his potential could come out. So they wanted...
Is it more about his potential, or is it the fact that as a personality, as you know, from a human aspect, the man was a captain of all the youth teams? He was just a calming effect in the dressing room. Do you think that was more of a case?
For the kind of player, the personality was affecting the potential. For the kind of charisma that could have, or anyway, even a silent charisma, you know, that could have with the other teammates. But was not a kind of charity contract. It was not something like,
no, of course
okay,
not.
let's make another contract because he got a tragic story. Wouldn't be fair.
No, I just wanted to know whether his human aspect sort of outweighed the athletic ability because of what he can provide a team.
I think it did. I mean,
that's what I mean.
If you look at it, you know, he was a soft-spoken guy.
Great leader.
You know, he touched a lot of people in many different ways. I mean, I was surprised people who'd had him as an opponent, people had played, you know, he did change a lot of clubs. And, you know, it's one thing, I think, when something like this happens, for you to obviously be very hurt, very struck by it. It's another thing for you to, you know, feel the need to go and emote about it on Twitter or whatever. And you know, so many people only played with him briefly. And, you know, I think as we were talking earlier, one of those guys, of course, was Totò Di Natale at Udinese. And, he, you know, he's, what, 7, 8 years older. He developed this relationship with him. Over the fact that Di Natale's mother had passed away, and obviously Morosini had been through that, and Di Natale talked about, you know, how much his relationship with this, you know, this young, you know, Di Natale, the big star, and sort of young, sort of bench player, basically, who knew he wasn't going to be around, was going to be on loan. The two had struck up this rapport, and I think it showed his human side quite eloquently.
And of course, Udinese will be taking care of his sister.
That's right. Udinese have a charitable foundation, and you know,
the wife of President of Udinese, Giuliana Pozzo, is known to be extremely active in all these charity things. It's not something that is coming out just in this day, and yeah, it was basically in that way. And actually, why this Serie A day was called off? I can take responsibility of what I'm saying. Actually, the Italian FA was pushed to do that in that way, because when Udinese heard the news, they said, no way we are going to go on the pitch. When Inter heard that, said, no way we are going to take advantage of that. What FA should have done, charge them of a points reduction near free, so they said, okay, let's do it that way.
Yes, and of course they did, which was an honourable statement. Of course, he made his Serie A debut for Udinese against Inter, and that was the game that got cancelled, and of course all the others this weekend. But we like to remember him because he was always a man that smiled, and that's how we'd like to remember him from here on in. But do come back after the break, and we'll be talking about football and everything that's happening in Spain just in time for the Champions League. See you then.
We're back now, and we're going to be talking some Liga, which is rather appropriate because Real Madrid's lead is still 4 points after the weekend's action. But both Real Madrid and Barcelona had quite a bumpy ride. And of course, next Saturday night is that little game we like to call El Clásico, Mina. You excited?
Of course I'm excited. This is going to be the biggest game of the season.
Should we read anything? I mean, we'll get to Real Madrid, I guess, in a minute. But Barcelona against Levante, it looked to me, even though they went on the pitch knowing that Real Madrid had already won, and so in keeping with the game plan, Tancredi, he rotated. They looked, let's face it, rather flat against a Levante team that sort of, a packed.
Wonderfully organised.
Yeah.
I think that the timing is also important, and you could see at the beginning also of the attitude of Real Madrid against Sporting Gijón, but especially Barcelona against Levante. First, because they don't have the same change that Real Madrid have, but also having the Champions League clash that is gonna be close there, and you know that you have to play in that way, and you know that already coming back from 10 points behind, now they have 4 points. Levante was really giving all the efforts on the pitch. They were looking a bit fatalist, I would say, like let's see if we will win this time. And I must say also that all the countries in a way are the same, because I don't want to be the Italian, but even in this case, there was a bit the hand of the referee when it's going to the end of the season, and the big clubs need a bit of help. Something is coming with the penalty of Barcelona, honestly.
Did you think that was a penalty? So you don't think it was a penalty?
I think that if it wouldn't be Barcelona,
it wouldn't have been given.
Let's think that it was for Levante against Barcelona. Never.
You know what? I'm very much one of those types of people that says that, but people complain about big clubs always getting the penalties, but big clubs are always playing in the opposition third, so they're always more likely to get these penalties. Having said that,
but I judge case by case.
So you've become you're channeling your inner Mourinho when it comes to
because Mourinho, of course, manages a very small club that has no history whatsoever of getting advantages.
Can I tell you one thing? Of course, I can't compare myself to the professional referees.
No, with
but
the Barca
when I was refereeing in amateur leagues, professional.
Oh yes, we have a referee with us.
I have a referee. I had as the same teachers that Collina had, and that also Nicola Rizzoli, that by the way I tell you now, 80% will be the Champions League final referee, by the way. And when I was refereeing the amateur league, and it was 10-15 minutes to the end, and the very favorite team, few times, but the very favorite team was losing, I was almost ready to give them every time something, because there was a kind of pressure anyway, and it was just amateur, just 500 people around me. So imagine this.
Okay, so what we've learned is because Tancredi allowed bigger teams felt the pressure to give away penalties to bigger teams, then surely Isaac Cuenca wasn't actually fouled.
But Levante midfielder Valdo at the time said that there was no penalty, and that he was really almost disgusted with the behaviour of Guardiola, who applied so much pressure on him.
Here's a quick question, and since we're keeping in this very conspiratorial vein.
No, we're not keeping it conspiracy. This is what he said.
I'll ask Mina because I know that she knows. You do know where Valdo started his career and who he supports, yeah?
Okay.
This is Real Madrid's Valdo.
Point made, but
look,
whether it was a referee or not, I don't think that we can read too much into this. But I do think Levante played a very good game. What I liked about them is that they were very honest. They weren't actually trying to fight for the ball possession. They were like, you know what, we can't actually fight you that. Take the ball, we're just going to counter-attack,
If Milan did that, why Levante shouldn't do that?
Exactly, and they did it well. They almost took some points away from this match.
Yeah.
It didn't work out for them, but I thought it was very honest. But we can't take too much from Barcelona. Like you said, it was a weakened team somewhat.
Let's get
Cesc Fabregas's behaviour. I'm going to say it again. I thought was despicable.
We're gonna get to Cesc in a minute, but we've got Tim Stannard. You know him as the La Liga Loca blogger from 442. Tim, thanks for being with us. Very quick and easy and I think rather straightforward question. If Real Madrid had dropped points against Gijón, would Guardiola have put out the lineup that he did put out, and would he have taken Xavi off at halftime?
Excellent question.
I think he would. I think there's still a very, very long way to go in this particular battle between the two, so I'm not sure that they would be thinking that far ahead. I think all Pep Guardiola wants to do is just pick up the 3 points in every single match. And before the Levante game, Pep Guardiola was saying, you know, everyone, Levante is a very, very tough team to beat, and they beat Real Madrid in their ground. They're 5th place in the league. They've been in the top 4 for some 27 rounds now, so they're no pushovers. So I don't think he would have done any particular changes in that one. I think he would have just gone out for the win no matter what. And even though there was a couple of players arrested, you've got to remember that even Barcelona's, you could say, second-string players are pretty fantastic. So you've got to say praise to Levante for making life very difficult for them, but it's exactly what Pep Guardiola said would happen.
Regarding Levante, and obviously there's been a lot of talk of how you stop Barcelona and whatever else, I was struck by the fact that they sat deep, they parked the bus, and they were very happy to concede the wings. Now, it's interesting because here in England where we are, when people do analysis and they say, what's wrong with the team? They're always like, oh, look, they're too narrow, they're defending too narrow, and whatever else. I kind of feel like if you're playing against Barcelona, and I thought Levante did this, you might as well defend narrow and happily concede the crosses, because if you look at the size of the Levante defenders and versus the size of the Barcelona strikers, unless they're going to chuck Piqué up there or something, you can go ahead and cross the ball all day. Nothing's going to happen.
Well, this is it. Levante played the same way now, very successfully for the past 16 months. They're an old, slow team, except on the counter-attack when they've got one or two very fast players, and what they do is they just soak up the pressure. They can just boot the ball out all day long, but then they wait for their moment, and it's all about the transitions. There's a little bit of Real Madrid about them in the speed, the way they can get up get the park very, very quickly, and they're an extremely effective team as well. They only need sometimes 2 or 3 chances to get a goal, so they played that one perfectly. It's an extremely experienced back 5, you could say, some 170 years between them, so they know exactly what to do. They're happy to sit back and, as you said, play it quite narrow but take their chances very, very carefully. They conserve energy as much as possible, so they can punish you when they want on that particular moment, and they've been doing this to teams all year.
Right, let's move on just to Real Madrid and against their match, where they suffered as well quite a bit. Now, do you think that Mourinho thought he had that in the bag by playing Sahin in the midfield, sort of thinking, yeah, it's Sporting, I'm not going to put out like a fabulous midfield, rest them for a bit?
Well, he didn't really have much choice because Xabi Alonso was suspended for this particular game, so he could have played Granero in there, but he has chosen Sahin. More recently, perhaps thinking of next season, I think is going to be the favoured backup to Xabi Alonso. I mean, this is still the Bundesliga Player of the Year of last year, so it's not exactly a youngster coming in. So no, they took it very seriously indeed, more than the crowd did, and clearly more than the players did. Again, Mourinho, like Pep Guardiola, although we haven't heard from Mourinho, but you can tell the message is the 3 points, the match against Atletico Madrid is worth the same as the Clásico, and the one against Sporting as well. It's all 3 points. And I get the feeling that the players went out on Saturday thinking the game was already won. They wouldn't have to do that much. Sporting actually fielded 7 defenders, which is from their squad, a back 5 and then 2 central defenders in front of them. And they had a very hard working front 3, and they didn't do too badly. So this was a case of Real Madrid just trying to grind it down, but they didn't have the speed, they didn't really have the energy to take on Sporting, and they really, really suffered. And it was some 15 minutes toward the end of time when they finally got control of the game. And I was in the Santiago Bernabeu. That was a very, very, very nervous crowd, and a very relieved crowd when Cristiano got the 2nd goal for Madrid and Benzema got the 3rd. They really were fearing the worst, of maybe something similar to what happened against Valencia last week.
Tim, you talked about the tactics and the choices he made, and I agree with you. Obviously, at some point you want to find out whether Sahin can contribute something to Real Madrid this season, and he chose to play him alongside Khedira, which I thought was a bit funny. I know in Spain they're obsessed with a trivote and double pivot and all this jazz, but bottom line is you're playing against a team that are just sitting back the whole time, and yet and you're out there with an extra sort of more defensive midfielder.
Exactly.
And the reality is, if Trejo doesn't act like an idiot and try to, impersonate Maradona, and doesn't give the ball away in such a stupid situation, Real Madrid might have only drawn that game, maybe even lost it.
Well, that's it. He made some bold tactical changes, certainly at half-time, when you could tell you think the formation he's thinking for the Clasico and maybe the Champions League with Di Maria and Benzema on the bench, and the idea was to rest them for that particular game. But he ended up with playing 6 forward players. He ended up on the pitch with Ozil, with Benzema, with Higuain, with Cristiano Ronaldo and Di Maria, and just the one, taking off Sahin, and just the one central midfielder. So you're right, he corrected his error, and he was just throwing things forward. It was quite anarchic. I know they expected resistance from Sporting, but I don't think Jose Mourinho. You saw him on the bench. He was nervous. He was not happy. Excuse me. He was not happy with his team at all, especially some of the. I think Arbeloa is not having a very good season at all at the moment, and he was really, really angry with his players because they just don't seem to. They weren't taking the game as seriously as they should have been. So it should have been very easy for them. Instead, it was very, very hard working towards the end and very tough.
Considering that it's 5 days to Clasico, so the Shakespeare question to you about Real Madrid: Higuain or Benzema, and why Higuain or Benzema if you pick the other one? And as long as you mentioned Arbeloa, would you really play Arbeloa against Barcelona?
It's 2 good questions there. I think Benzema is the #1 striker now for Jose Mourinho. He might choose to play both. He might choose to play one of them out on the right-hand side, but Di Maria is back to fitness now, and he's an incredibly important player for Real Madrid. Karim Benzema, Gonzalo Higuain, 2 fantastic strikers, but in a one-on-one situation, if you only got one chance the entire game, you want Karim Benzema to take it. He has got, as they say, the cold blood, the cold-headed striking nature about him, and Gonzalo Higuain can sometimes need 2 or 3 goes. Although, it's no offence to Gonzalo Higuain, so Benzema is now the #1 for Mourinho. And you might see Lassana Diarra featuring in at right-back. His talks of him going to Turkey, and he might well be taking over from Arbeloa, but Jose Mourinho did say last season that Arbeloa is his favourite player, but he's just not in the right kind of form at the moment. And as you said, he's a bit of a liability on the right-hand side, which is something you would never, ever say about Arbeloa. He was the steady Eddie, the guy you could rely on to put in the 7 out of 10, the 8 out of 10, and not really do anything too crazy. But he's just lost the plot a little bit this season, just lost the concentration, and is a liability for Madrid.
Well, as long as it's not Hamid Altintop playing right back.
We want
the poor guy got to play left back the other day.
Sorry?
The poor guy, I think Apel ended up having to play left back, and they had all sorts of troubles. And I kind of felt sorry for him. He's like a bit of a stooge for Madrid at the moment.
Yeah, I feel sorry for Altintop a lot until I look at the size of his wages. Then I feel a little less sorry for him. But can you tell us, Mourinho looked wound up, as you would be when you're struggling to score against Sporting Gijón and Javier Clemente. I was the better of you for much of the game. But what happened? What was that incident where he threw that hissy fit with the Sporting Gijón assistant? With
yeah,
him
this it's happened in Spanish football a little bit now. When one team's attacking, somehow a ball gets thrown onto the pitch, and also the game basically has to be stopped. However, the ball gets thrown from the pitch, from the bench, and I was sitting in the stands behind the bench, and I saw a ball being rolled out by a Sporting player, I think it was potentially the reserve goalkeeper, out onto the pitch just when Real Madrid were attacking, and the referee had to stop the game. And it was bedlam, basically. Jose Mourinho was shouting at the 4th official. He stormed into the other technical area. Pepe belted it back into the box again. As only he can, and it all kicked off a little bit. And after the game, Javier Clemente was all innocent, saying all we were doing is just giving the ball back because we didn't want to keep it. And it's happened. The idea was created by Javier Giddy, the former Zaragoza manager. They did it in a Getafe game last season. Osasuna tend to throw the ball from the crowd, so it's a little bit of a tactic, you could say, the dark arts. And Javier Clemente knows all about the dark arts of football.
Okay, so what do you think about the, just a quick one about the defence, because they are looking very shaky in the sense, Pepe is not his usual self, Ramos gave away a penalty, and of course, but he was actually very good in terms of creativity. So do you think that against Bayern Munich, when they do face the attacking lineup that Bayern is sure to deploy, will there be question marks there?
I think so. They always seem to be conceding goals, especially in the Santiago Bernabeu, and that was something that's quite rare. They just lack a little bit of concentration from set pieces and in the air. So it is a concern. It's all very well when you can outscore the other team by 4 or 5 goals, but in these very tight Champions League games, and bear in mind this is the first difficult team that Real Madrid will be playing over these 2 games, it could well cost them, especially against a player like Mario Gomez. So don't be surprised if you see Lasana Diarra making a return at right back with Pepe and Ramos and Marcelo. You might even see Coentrao coming in, because I think defensively he's a little bit stronger than Marcelo, but you do lack a bit of flair going up the left.
Yes, but Marcelo gives them that width that they desperately need against such teams.
That's the thing. He's going to have to decide. Maybe you'll have Coentrao for one of the games. He has preferred Coentrao in Champions League games. So there's going to be some big decisions over the next few days. You might see Coentrao, for example, playing in the Camp Nou. That wouldn't surprise me either.
Tim, all we got time for today, but thanks for joining us. That's Tim Stannard. You know him as La Liga Loca, the 442 blogger for all things Spanish. We're going to be back in a little bit. Hey, we're back with a little bit of the old Bundesliga. Ja, ein bisschen Bundesliga mit Tancredi und Mina Rzouki. Okay, that's enough of that.
Well, we can stand up. We leave you alone doing monologue in German.
No, but...
Shall we do that? Sorry.
People actually tune in to hear your thoughts, Mina. And yours too, Tancredi. Less so, perhaps. But
not really.
We basically have a new champion in Germany, just about, not quite mathematically, but of course this weekend Borussia Dortmund winning the Ruhr Derby against arch-rival Schalke 04, and Bayern Munich held by lowly crummy Mainz.
So we're going to talk about the next Chelsea manager? Yes?
Who would that be?
I think it's really strange. No, he's not going to be the next. I'd kill him. I'm just surprised that Heinke has just said, not that, of course, that it's, you know, now they're so many points away, 8 points away, but still he just gave up and he was like, well, he crowned them champions. He basically said, this is it, you know, Dortmund, and, you know, they're deserved winners and they deserve to be where they are and good luck to them. And of course, you know, the management said at the time.
Are you expecting mind games like between Ferguson and Mancini? Well, you don't have a Scottish and an Italian there doing that, so it's, that makes...
Good point.
No, that's right, because Germans have no history of being sort of clever or devious whatsoever.
No, I mean, mind games are managed.
You got the mind games actually in a different way, and we'll get to that in a minute. But of course, they came straight from the top. Uli Hoeneß having a bit of a go at Borussia Dortmund. But before I get to that, I mean, Schalke Dortmund, Schalke go a goal up, I should say. It's a crazy atmosphere. Jefferson Farfan, that's right, and Dortmund just keep plugging and keep plugging.
They looked tired. They looked tired.
But that's what I was going to get at. This wasn't the old sort of Dortmund, you know, carefree, running around like maniacs. This is a team that's really given a lot, and I thought they showed tremendous character. I mean, a bit lucky, I think, with the Lucas Piszczek goal.
What a goal!
Yeah, looked very good. And then, you know, but then to make that substitution at halftime, you know, you bring on your heroic captain, Sebastian Kehl, the guy who, in some ways, and we're going to get our blogger, James Thorgood.
The connection between...
yeah, he's a connection between the old and new, because if you remember the old Dortmund, the one that overspent and got itself into this huge mess, which is why they had to go with the kids to begin with.
Yes.
You know, it was down to giving people like Kehl, who's, you know, a nice player, but
it is also a plan for the team to be elastic in this way. And honestly, as much as I see this kind of games played by Borussia Dortmund, the less I understand how really they could be kicked out so easily from Champions League.
I can, because I think that kind of football is, you need so much energy for it. What I thought was strange was Klopp said after Bayern Munich that if there was any game that they could play, because they were so exhausted after that game, that they could so take on Schalke now because of the energy of the derby, they could so do it. But then they didn't really, and that was a few days later, and they looked like they were just shattered, they were just going with the motions, you know, like Shinji Kagawa was nowhere near what you expected him to be.
It's still a derby. I mean,
but this is the thing, do you not think their kind of football is too exhaustive for European matches? That's why I get worried about sometimes Juventus, for example. It's that kind of energy, all out, not so much.
You haven't had to worry much about Juventus in Europe this season, of course.
Ha ha,
let's get James Thurgood on this, you know, from Bundesliga.com. James, we were just talking about the character that Borussia Dortmund had shown. I mean, I thought they were clearly exhausted against Schalke. You go a goal down, everything's kind of conspiring against you in some ways, and yet they get a bit of luck with Piszczek, and they go and they get the winner. I'm struck how, viewed from the outside, it's almost like it's a different star every week for them. Obviously last season it was Barrios, and then this season you had Lewandowski starting strong, and Götze, and then Götze gets injured, and then you had Kagawa, and then you had Kuba Błaszczykowski. Then Piszczek comes up with this ridiculous goal. Does that say something about the team, or is it just pure randomness?
No, it definitely says something. It says a lot about the team, and it says a lot about the mentality that Jurgen Klopp has inspired amongst this squad of players. And you can see how healthy it is for them. And I mean, it was interesting. I was listening to you making the points about them falling short in Europe. And on the one hand, I think a lot of inexperience had its role in their fortunes in the Champions League. But at the same time, had they not really kind of completely given up against Marseille in the last game, I mean, there's no other way to describe it. They just gave up. Had they not done that, they might have been in the Europa League. But at the same time, had they stayed in Europe, they might not have won they might not be on their way to a second consecutive title.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Schalke, because I actually think they defended not badly for once. What's going on the other side? Because their strength is their offensive unit, but it looked like they weren't ticking at all. Huntelaar wasn't his usual best. And considering that the stadium was entirely on their side, you had all the deafening whistles when the names were being called out for Borussia Dortmund's lineup. You had the fan thing. Why weren't they performing as well as you expect them to in this kind of match?
Well, Schalke have lost, I think, 5 of the 6 games they've played against the other sides in the top 4. And it hasn't been their season, and mainly because of their defence. Now, it was interesting. Huntelaar didn't have a great game, but they adopted a really strange approach in that they really bombarded long balls forward to Dortmund's back line and really caused a lot of discomfort that way, which is something we haven't seen of Schalke too much this season. They're a team that generally like to get the ball down and play it on the ground. And so, for me, it was interesting. They did up their game for the Revier Derby. It was a much better performance than the performance in the first half of the season against Dortmund. But at the same time, neither team was ticking at neither team was on full cylinders, It was an interesting one. Dortmund were lackluster. The goals did come thick and fast at the beginning, and then it was very much a to and fro game. And if anything, Dortmund was slightly on the back foot, as I say, because of the long ball tactic Schalke were applying, and it was definitely causing them a lot of discomfort. So for me, Schalke, if they improve their back line, they could be title contenders in the near future. But right now, that's what's let them down this season. Now,
James, they've pretty much won the title, what with Bayern Munich drawing. I was struck by the fact that I went online to some of the German football websites I visit when I'm not on Bundesliga.com, obviously.
Thank you.
I saw this quotes from Uli Hoeneß. Now, those who don't know, Uli Hoeneß, of course, is the god of Bayern Munich. He runs the club, ex-player.
The Holy Spirit, the god is Beckenbauer.
Yeah, exactly, sorry, that's right. And he had a bit of a pop at Borussia Dortmund, talking about how they think they're so clever. Now let's see their spending increase. And he talked about Gundogan and how he was poor at the start of the season, but they stuck with him, and that if Gundogan had been a Bayern player, the media would have driven him out the rubbish way he played early in the season, and so on. Were you expecting this? Is there some grand plan behind this, or is it just Hoeneß letting rip for the hell of it?
No, it's old man bitterness, unfortunately,
yes.
I think, in this case. And really, I mean, he's upset that Dortmund really, I mean, they beat them all over the park, Dortmund, and I think the way the victory went down really would have upset a man like Uli Hoeneß. And so he was just having a bit of a pop at Hans-Joachim Watzke, the chief executive at Dortmund, and basically say, I can't wait to see the money, and that he's going to potentially turn out to be the next Willy Lemke, who was obviously the Werder Bremen chairman that, promised a lot, delivered little, and had a part to play in their collapse at 98-99. And as I say, it was just old man bitterness, I think.
I have 2 questions for you. The first is a moment back to Schalke. Why there isn't a red carpet in Gelsenkirchen for Jefferson Farfan? Why?
Well, he has burnt a lot of bridges at that club. It's an interesting one. He's been in sensational form since he came back from injury, and I've been wondering the same thing myself. But at the same time, he has done a lot of things that have upset the club and upset Stevens, even since Stevens arrived, earlier this season. And I just, there were sensational claims that he was making outrageous wage demands in order for them to keep him and things like that. And I just think he's interested in going elsewhere. And if there's no interest elsewhere, he might then obviously, turn tail and go back
but
to
there
Schalke.
is interest, actually. I mean,
Yeah.
but honestly, I think, okay, Huntelaar, okay, Raul, but I think that it still is not appreciated enough how much Huntelaar and Raul can take advantage of the Farfan job there, honestly.
No, I completely agree with you, Tancredi, and really, as I said, I mean, Farfan set up goals. He scored a couple of sensational ones to boot as well. And, I mean, he'd be a vital asset for any team. And if he were to leave on a free transfer, in my opinion, it's ludicrous for Schalke to let that happen. Because he could easily fetch a couple of tens of millions, type thing, and he's a talented player that could fit into most teams around Europe.
I have a second quick question for you.
Yeah.
What will be Arjen Robben's reaction when he will see Howard Webb?
It's not going to be a good one, I don't think. And he's been having a bad week as well, Mr. Arjen Robben, so I feel sorry for him.
Punching. So you bet on punching?
Yeah, maybe, or a kick here and there on the ankles, you never know.
James, that's all we've got time for today, which is a shame because I wanted to ask you about Stuttgart going strong, unbeaten 10, won 8 of those 10, but alas, Tancredi wanted to talk about Arjen Robben instead, so hopefully you can join us again.
There will be nightmare waiting for me after
But
this.
I didn't even get to tell you that Schalke fans had gone and put pig's blood on the turnstiles for the visitors when Dortmund's fans would come in. Isn't that
Pig's blood.
Yeah, pig's blood. They covered the turnstiles with pig's blood for Borussia Dortmund fans when they went
Very
in.
tasty.
Honestly, mother of all derbies.
What do you think black pudding is made of?
Ugh, I
called
know, but still, you don't want to actually,
Sanguinaccio.
you don't want to walk into a
Morcilla
town.
in Spain.
Yeah.
Do you eat morcilla?
No, of
Morcilla,
course not.
sanguinaccio.
Exactly.
I would
So there
never
you go.
eat that.
So the football show is...
Exactly, the World Series. No, but it's funny because you talk about, Howard Webb, of course, the referee for Bayern Munich against Real Madrid, and you wonder what Arjen Robben's reaction is going to be.
mia.
Of course, to make the point, what will Xabi Alonso's reaction going to be? Like, is it now open season for somebody to come and karate kick me in the chest? It's amazing how, that one bald man managed
And
to
also,
shoot him.
the penalty, I have to say that was not awarded to Bayern Munich, Champions League final. Mourinho, that had the job at Inter in that moment. I mean, perfect selection, our web. Perfect selection for journalists. For the game, I don't know. For journalists, for sure.
Well,
Media gift.
we're getting slightly sidetracked on this Howard Webb thing, but I just think it is pretty crazy. But by the same token, at this stage, when you can't have, you obviously can't have a German ref, you can't have a Spanish ref. There's issues with Portuguese refs when Mourinho's there. He's had issues in the past. Put all those things together. I mean, the one interesting thing about Webb is in Barcelona, the local press all said, "Oh, look, this is a terrible appointment. It shows, UEFA's bias towards Real Madrid, and presumably because they'll be more physical." And in Madrid, they said, "Oh, this is a terrible appointment.
Yeah,
Shows UEFA's bias towards Bayern Munich."
Super mind games. This is the Champions League of mind games.
Maybe this is something that UEFA got right. We're going to be back with our final segment on the World Football Show. Stay with us.
Hello and welcome back to the World of Football Show here on Sports Tonight Live. Now we have a different segment for you today.
I like this. I like this. Go on.
Could you throw me off my game? Basically, we're going to ask you to get involved. So some of you, if you had read Twitter or are on Twitter, you would have noticed the earlier tweet that asked you for questions. And this is the segment where we answer them for you. And of course,
Kind of Who Wants to Be Millionaire, something like that.
a little bit like
A
that,
little bit like
exactly.
that.
But it's just our opinions. Of course,
And you
everyone.
can't phone a friend.
Okay, I can't, huh?
No, but there's 50-50.
Okay.
And so it's just your questions. If you do want to get in touch with us we are going to start running this segment as much as possible, do contact us on Twitter at STWorldFootball. Please get in touch. Okay, so let's start with the first question, and this is one that I like a lot, and this is from @Gary1388. Is this trio at Real Madrid, so that's Ronaldo, Benzema, and Gonzalo Higuain, a better trio than Henry, Eto'o, and Messi of 08-09?
I'm going to say no. And briefly, the answer is, even though Henry didn't have as great a season back then, although he did score a fair number of goals, but this Benzema, Higuain, and Ronaldo isn't really a trio. It's not that often that all three are on the pitch at the same time, or when they are, it's usually because Mourinho's made a mistake and they need to get back into the game. So you can't really speak of a trio. I mean, there's one outstanding player, one very good one, and one outstanding goal scorer. But the other three, I thought, Henry, Eto'o, and Messi in 08-09, I mean, that really was a trio. They did function together and they did work together.
Yes.
I see that.
I couldn't actually add anything more to that because that's well
I
said.
see that, and I double also with the fact that if we don't look just at the games, but the value, I mean, at the level of the three different players, even if Henry wasn't at his peak, but still, Higuain is too much just a finisher if compared to the others.
I got one for you.
Best converter in Europe, eh?
Tancredi, or both of you actually. It's from John Sol 50. Sorry, it's from at Serie A Live. If you could choose one Serie A related person, dead or alive, to interview, who would it be and why?
Let's
Mina.
first.
Okay, but this is going to be kind of like a nostalgic thing, and that's just because of my
Please don't say
personal
Luciano Mongi. Please don't say Luciano.
No, we're not going to say Luciano. Oh, actually, that's quite a good one. No, I would say Gaetano Scirea, just because I'd like to know what he would think about this current Juventus. Oh, I could really do Agnelli as well. No, we're going to go with Scirea,
Okay.
just because I want to know what he would think of this. The football nowadays, considering the amount of cheats that there are. I'm not saying anything about Ashley Young over here.
Okay, so I would say, I have to say three options, but very quick. The first
Three for
one,
the price of one, ladies and gentlemen.
the first one, I would say Moggi, but it's not Serie A related anymore, so I can't say that. I would say Daniele De Rossi, because it's the guy that is really speaking by heart and is telling the truth. But today I have to pick another name, and there is a reason also. You said dead or alive. Today passed away Carlo Petrini, former Roma and Milan player. He was 64. He wasn't, actually, he made an impact more on sport journalism than football, I would say. He became very famous in early 2000 years, and along the years with two books that he wrote, talking as anybody else before and anybody else after talk about doping and match fixing in 60s, 70s, and early 80s in Italy.
Then
he really affected sport journalism, and he showed, even if he wasn't a journalist, that investigative journalism and sport journalism could go together.
It's interesting in that point, actually, if you like that sort of thing. Every country's had somebody, like that. Certainly the Eamon Dunphy book in England, in the U.S., Ball Forward by Jim Buten, dealing with baseball, somebody who sort of lifted the lid, and we stopped seeing professional athletes as gods and started seeing them as people with their failings.
Actually, it's a very good choice. What would be your choice, Gab? We didn't even get that.
Oh,
someone who you didn't interview still?
Yeah, is there anyone?
Goodness, somebody from get back to me after show. Honestly,
I would. Yeah, I mean,
I'd want to say
we can ask Scirea what he thinks about that as well.
I'd certainly
go with Peppino Prisco, vice president of Italy.
Well, if you talk about dead people, yeah, he would be. He would be an interesting one. One guy who.
Profession.
Sorry.
Never mind. Yes.
No. One choice for me would be a guy who's alive, who I think knows more than most, and a guy who I've had the privilege of interviewing many occasions, but I'd love talking to him, and that's Franco Baldini.
Oh.
Really?
I thought he was going to say Gianluca.
I thought you would make the face.
Sorry,
yes.
I don't like the man. Right, at Bear Fand. Well, he's good at his job, I just don't like him. I can have an opinion.
Okay, go on, Luciano. Mina, go on.
At Bear Fand. I was wondering what the... No, it's not just about the Juventus thing, by the way. It's the fact that he has to have so many opinions about anything.
God forbid somebody have opinions. That might actually make him interesting as an interviewee. Sorry,
I was wondering what the best game you have ever seen is.
Wow, the best game as the... Well,
Come on,
Okay.
trying to make it under 5 minutes.
All right, while you think about it, I will tell you.
Italy, France, World Cup 2006, Olympiastadion, Berlin. I have to pick that.
Oh, really? Okay, that's
I
an
was
interesting
there.
one.
I was there too. I'm going to actually pick the semi-final game, which was the most dramatic because, of course, it was against Germany.
Of course.
But I wasn't there. I
as
just
a-
picked that because I was in Olympiastadion.
As a neutral, though, the most dramatic game, 2004-05 Champions League final in Istanbul, Liverpool, and AC Milan.
Okay.
Were you there?
Yes.
Wow. Did you saw the face of Berlusconi and Galliani in the first half and at the end of the game?
I was, believe it or not, I was not sitting with Mr. Berlusconi.
I don't believe that. I don't believe that.
Well, mine would be the semi-final 2003 Real Madrid versus Juventus. I was living in Real Madrid. I was a student there. I was nearly going to get killed because, of course, I'm a Juventus supporter. What a terrific game. I think Zidane probably wished he still played for Juventus at that time. Nedved, Trezeguet, Del Piero, 3-1.
I was there
to
that
Juve.
day, actually, as well. And my favorite part of that, very quickly, was in the
Zambrotto's
first 10
pass?
minutes. No, in the first 10 minutes of the game, both Del Piero and Davids, both of them do the step over roulette. If you go back and you watch it, and it's kind of like their way of
Davids.
saying to Zidane, like, you know what? Spanish press goes on about this. It's no big deal. Any professional footballer can do it. What? It's a hype.
Okay, actually, my producers just come in with one last question. You have to give one word only. Who will make third in Serie A?
We'll make third in Serie A.
Third. Who will be the third?
Roma, Roma,
I
Roma.
say Lazio.
I gave you my answer.
Oh, Roma. Okay. I say Lazio too. That's all we have time for today. Do join us next week, same time, same place, same football chat. We'll see you then. Take care. Bye.
Piece myself about this in the Times. There's always more tests that you can do. The problem is some of these tests are extremely invasive, and also some of these defects can sort of develop literally from one day to the next. Remember the case of Lilian Thuram, who after Euro 2008 announced that, yes, I'm going to play one more season at Paris Saint-Germain and then retire, and he went and he had his medical, and they found he had an enlarged heart, which was quite a risky heart defect, and they said, no, you need to retire straight away. And this is a guy who played 20 years at the highest level for Juventus, for Parma, with the French national team, had been tested every which way, and nothing had turned up before. You know, we can look at it as we can all put our faith in science and in medical science and test people continuously. But then, you know, you get to the point that sometimes these invasive tests can damage players in other ways.
Yeah.
And I think the reality is it feels like it's happened a lot. But if you look at it relative to the number of people who play sport, not just professional sport,
Yeah, that's very true.
it's such a tiny, tiny proportion, and it only takes, you know, one or two sort of extra cases to make it seem as if, you know, all of a sudden there's an epidemic of this. And maybe, you know, we have to take all the precautions that we can reasonably take, but maybe, you know, you need to be a bit fatalistic about it as well and accept that sometimes things just happen.
I know that numbers are numbers, but of course, with all the structure that there is in Italy, and 1 month ago we were talking about Muamba, and everyone was saying, Italy is an inspiration, and...
Or is it the fact that as a personality, as you know, from a human aspect, the man was a captain of all the youth teams, who was just a calming effect in the dressing room? Do you think that was more of a case?
For the kind of player, the personality was affecting the potential. For the kind of charisma that could have, or anyway, even a silent charisma, you know, that could have with the other teammates, but was not a kind of charity contract. Was not something like,
no, of course
okay,
not.
let's make another contract because he got a tragic story. Would be wouldn't be fair.
No, I just wanted to know whether his human aspect sort of outweighed the athletic ability because of what he can provide
I think
a team.
it did. I mean, I think if you look at it, you know, he was a soft-spoken guy.
Great leader.
You know, he touched a lot of people in many different ways. I mean, I was surprised people who'd had him as an opponent, people who'd played, you know, he said he did change a lot of clubs. And, you know, it's one thing, I think, when something like this happens, for you to obviously be very hurt, very struck by it. It's another thing for you to, you know, feel the need to go and emote about it on Twitter or whatever. And so many people only played with him briefly, and I think as we were talking earlier, one of those guys, of course, was Totò Di Natale at Udinese, and he's what, 7, 8 years older. He developed this relationship with him over the fact that Di Natale's mother had passed away, and obviously Morosini had been through that, and Di Natale talked about how much his relationship with this young Di Natale, the big star, and sort of young sort of bench player, basically, who knew he wasn't going to be around, was going to be on loan. The two had struck up this rapport, and I think it showed his human side quite eloquently.
And of course, Udinese will be taking care of his sister.
That's right. Udinese have a charitable foundation.
Apart from that, today Fabrice Muamba was discharged from the London hospital, and I mean, our life can be strange sometimes.
Yeah.
On Saturday, Morosini had 3 heart attacks and died, and Muamba survived 4 heart attacks, and after 1 month is discharged. And of course, with all these talks in Italy, the debate was open and saying, are we still so sure that it is really so good? And the question was also referred to the in the sports medicine institution. And they said, of course, everything, as Gabriele said, could be better in some way. But still, look at this. They showed, they had this statistic that after the structure in 1982 started to be in that way in Italy, the impact in Italy is on 1 case like that every 1 million, 1.5 million of professional sportists. Abroad Italy, the proportion is 1 case every 100,000, 150,000. So it is 10 times more.
Yes.
At the same time, when I was speaking with, before cause of the Muamba case, I was speaking with the former Inter head doctor, Piero Volpi, and changing opinions about these things is he was there at Inter when Inter saved practically Nwankwo Kanu that came from Ajax, and that is, and they found that he had this problem. The first thing he said was, first of all, let's keep in mind that it's not perfect. It's not a perfect system. He's not said that with all these screenings, everything will be found.
Of course. I want to talk a little bit more about the player. He had a and welcome to the World Football Show here on Sports Tonight Live. I'm Mina Rzouki, and I'm joined by my excellent co-host Gabriele Marcotti. Hello, Gab. How are you? Nice to have you back. And of course, Tancredi Palmeri, all the way from Italy. But sadly, we do start this show on a sad note after the death of Piermario Morosini. I'm sure that you've heard Serie A, all games in Serie A, Serie B and Lega Pro were cancelled because of this, because of the tragedy. He collapsed on the pitch in a game, Serie B game between Pescara and Livorno. He's a Livorno midfielder. Died on the way to hospital suffering a cardiac arrest. The autopsy will be today, so as far as I know, we still don't know yet whether it was the exact cause of death. But it seems to be happening more and more often, obviously, with what's happened with Fabrice Muamba and so many deaths at the moment occurring, so many... well, obviously Fabrice Muamba managed to escape that, but these things are still happening despite the elevated measures that are taken by Italy. Do you think that this is something that we can stop, or is it they really can't do much more, because it has apparently cancelled out 90% of these types of incidents happening?
Yeah, I'm always dubious about statistics like that, because I mean, I don't know how people can actually tell, like,
what's going on.
You can't prove a negative, but I think several people spoke about this quite eloquently.
We see a very tragic life in the sense that he lost his mother in 2001. 2 years later, he lost his father from cardiac problems as he suffered heart problems. His disabled brother committed suicide 2 years after that. And he's left alone with his older sister. And of course, now he's passed away too. But as a player, you know, he was an under-21 international. He played in all the youth systems. He grew up in the prestigious Atlanta youth system. He played alongside Balotelli, Abate, Marchisio, what kind of player? I mean, he was renowned for his athletic ability. Can you share with us a little bit more about the stories?
Well, he was not very famous, of course, and it was more
owned by Udinese.
Owned by the Udinese, yes, and this is an important point. Not very famous, but by people that are interested in Serie B in category, was known as a reliable midfielder. We can say a kind of more with more gentle foot than Gattuso, a kind of in that way. But there is a good point. He was owned by Udinese, and he was changing a lot of teams along the years.
Yes.
And he was owned by Udinese since, if I'm not mistaken, must be already 7 years. Now, Udinese also renovated the contract with him, and he changed team almost every year. When is happening something like this, if a team is not believing anymore in a player, after the 4 years expiring the contract, it's just saying, okay, we're not interested anymore. We have given you on loan for 4 years, nothing happened, no more. Instead, and Udinese is always taking care about the talent, we know about them. Instead, they felt that sooner or later his potential could come out. So they wanted...
Is it more about his potential?